So my name's Ashton Adams, and I'm the graduate assistant here at the Center for Career and Leadership Development. I'm studying IO psychology. I'm about to start my second semester, so pretty exciting. But I've really enjoyed my time, and I hope that everybody's had a great experience with Mind the Gap. It's been really great, and I think it's gone really well. So today's conversation is going to be about graduate school and whether this is the next step for you. For me, I went to graduate school right after graduating undergrad. So I graduated from the University of Evansville in May, and then I started here in August. So I was doing my applications during undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to just kind of go straight into it if that was something that I'd be able to do. But it does depend on the person. So that's kind of the conversation we're going to have. And I'm hoping to hear some feedback from everyone and kind of just talk about maybe what you're thinking and any questions that you have. So debating graduate school, this is a frequently thought about question by many students. Maybe you want to get your PhD, that's a goal of yours, or you want to do some sort of professional school like physical therapy or physician's assistant. If it's a passion for furthering your education, if it's a desire to broaden your job opportunities, maybe you just want to get your master's because you know that that's going to make you a little bit more qualified than other job candidates. Um, how do you decide about that? We can help. So it's really personal for you, and it depends on whether you really think that it's necessary for the job that you want to do. So obviously you can't be a physical therapist without going to physical therapy school. But that doesn't mean that maybe you majored in business. That doesn't mean you can't go into a marketing position just straight out of undergraduate. You can do that. So it's really dependent on kind of what you were thinking and what your passions are and where your interests lie. So who should think about graduate school? Obviously soon to be graduates, but also any curious students and even people that maybe have been in the professional world for a while and they're thinking about maybe going back and getting their MBA, or they have their master's, but they've been working for a while and they want to go back and pursue a PhD. It really just kind of depends. Like I said, this is a really personal conversation about graduate school. So that's where I'm going to open it up to you guys and hopefully we can talk about it. But for me specifically, and we can talk about my story, I struggled to figure out kind of what I wanted to do. So my first year of undergrad, I was majoring in psychology, and I didn't really know where I wanted to go with that. I was thinking counseling. And then my second year, I added another major of sociology. I took a sociology class and I was like, this is not what I want. This is not, I didn't like it as much as I thought that I would. So I made the decision. I didn't want to double major in that. Like I knew I was going to be taking a lot of classes and I just didn't feel a passion towards it. So I talked to my advisor and I was kind of talking about different options. And I told her that I'm really interested in business, but I didn't really know kind of how those things would be interrelated because I did love psychology. Like I'm very passionate about psychology. I knew I didn't want to drop that major. And she told me that I should just get a minor in business administration and see kind of what the opportunities are from there. So then I talked to my specific academic advisor that was just like the kind of like the career guidance. And so then I went to my academic advisor, who is a psychology professor, and she said, why don't you look into industrial organizational psychology? That is exactly what you want to do. You like business and you like psychology. Let's put them together. And I had never even heard of it. Like my whole time for my first 2 years, I just kind of thought, okay, I'm going to have to do counseling, or I'm going to have to decide between doing business and just having that psychology background. It was really great to kind of see those things come together as an opportunity that I didn't even know existed. And so my senior year, I started applying to graduate programs. I did a lot of research on, which programs offered what. This UTC was my number one choice. We just have like a really comprehensive program, and the professors are great, and we're ranked high on PsyOps rankings for IO psychology programs. And so I knew that this was the direction that I wanted to go, but it took a lot of thinking and some trial and error to get there. And so I figured it out by about my first semester of senior year. And that's a lot of my friends had no idea what they wanted to do. So they were just kind of terrorizing me like, oh, wow, of course you have it figured out. But it was just because I was having a lot of conversations. So if you don't know what you want to do, that's not a bad thing. A lot of my friends took time off between going to grad school. I just had a friend, she's doing physical or physician's assistant, and she took like 9 months off. I had another friend take a year off and just like gain some working experience and get some hours. And that's absolutely an option. You don't have to pursue it straight out of your undergraduate degree, but if that's something that you're passionate about or that you think you really want to do, then obviously that's an option. I did it. It was hard to try and like do those applications during undergrad, but it did really pay off. And I'm really glad that it worked out that way for me, because I just knew that, I'm in the mindset of school. I'd love to like keep learning right now. So that way I can kind of build off of what I've been doing and not take that break. And that's just who I am and what worked for me. So let's talk about what you guys are interested in. I'd love to hear if anybody's interested in graduate school, maybe what you're thinking about studying, what your thoughts are, and maybe like what the possibilities are of you going to graduate school. Have you thought about it at all? So I'd love to just open it up and kind of hear from you guys.
I would like to attend graduate school after graduating. One issue is UTC doesn't have a graduate program in sociology. And I want to remain here. So it's finding out what other graduate school to apply to, for that. So it's like really just knowing where to go from here, since there's not that particular graduate program at our school. So
Yeah.
what do you suggest for that?
I would suggest trying to look at some online programs. I know that there are a lot that are offered for different degrees. And so it just kind of depends on whether a school offers it or not. I know that there are like a lot of MBA programs that are offered strictly online, and there's a lot of universities that are moving their classes towards online, especially now in the midst of this pandemic. People have found out that we can offer things online. And so instead of just kind of focusing on the people in the region, they realize they can like broaden their horizons and get people from all over the country without requesting them to come move and get these in-person classes. And so I think that that's absolutely an option. If you want to stay in Chattanooga and we don't offer that program, then I think searching for an online program would definitely be beneficial, and kind of seeing and weighing the different online programs and seeing if maybe that would work well for you.
Is it possible to go in a whole totally different field, say, be that counseling or social work? How does that integrate if you transition into something like that? Would you have to take additional undergrad courses to qualify?
Yeah. So for me, I knew that I wanted to do IO psychology, and unfortunately, my undergrad university is pretty small, and so they didn't always offer that class. And so I was able to still come to this program, but part of the prerequisite for being in this program is I had to take Intro to IO with Dr. O'Leary. I had to take that this past semester, and I took it as a graduate course, so there was like some extra work involved, but I did have to take that to be able to continue with this program. And there were a couple other programs that I was going to have to take some summer classes just to be able to be qualified to be in that program. So it really varies by the university or like the specific program at the university about what the prerequisites are. But because you majored in sociology, I'm guessing, because am I correct? You're in sociology?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
You can't, like, you don't have to stick to sociology at all. And I think that that's important to know, that like you can broaden and kind of, maybe you do want to do social work and you want to look into master's programs for that. That is an option. You don't have to stick just strictly to your major. We actually have somebody in our program who, she's a second year and she majored in marketing in her undergrad, and then she decided like I really want to do IO psych, and so she didn't have a ton of psychology background, but she's still in our program and she loves it and she's doing really well. So um, that's an example of somebody who kind of came from one side and is now doing something that's related, but it wasn't like she majored in psychology and is continuing psychology. So it just depends on the program for what would be required. And so it'll be like on a website, you'd be able to kind of see what the different requirements are, like how many classes you would have to take before.
Yeah, and I think actually bringing your questions to an academic department. So, for instance, I know that Ashton had established some regular communication with the IO psychology faculty and the program director here at UTC, but I think engage them in some of your problem solving or option finding. I think that can be really, really helpful. None of my degrees like relate to each other at all. Like my bachelor's degree is in religion with family child development as a minor. And then I've got a master's in leadership from the business school, and I have a PhD in higher education administration. I mean, literally, they don't make any sense at all. But what I've got in between each of those degrees is I have some work experience that I was able to go out and acquire a broader lens. And I would say this to you, Cindy, and to everyone else, that if you can combine seemingly disparate areas into one person, there's some really attractive kind of market dynamics there. So a lot of folks would be, I'm attracted to technology, computer science, engineering, but I really like working with people. That's a rarity. A lot of times there's people that are good with tools and processes, and there's people that are good with people. But if you can reconcile that gap, that's a market. For instance, when I'm the kid from the business school who walks into a college of education, and if you ever do that, they look at you weird. Like education and business, those are very different places. But I was there to kind of say, hey, we could be more efficient within education by leveraging these best practices. And oh, by the way, we can be more humane and more developmental within some of our business practices. So again, figuring out where your unique market is. And so I would agree, sociology is this terrifically broad field where it fits everywhere, but there's not a company out there like Sociology Incorporated, like that's not out there that I'm familiar with. And so sometimes you might need to massage some of your training in order to become the candidate that you'd like to be. So yes, I think you can swing a little bit, and using a playground, it's not always a ladder, it could be a swing, and find something in social work or in education or in psychology. I mean, or business. There's a lot of different aspects, but another way to do that is take the swing of work experience. That could be a really helpful piece. And I know that Kimberly and Caleb, they've said a few things in the chat as well. So I'll mute again.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I have a question. I am a psychology student. I'm actually very interested in applying for the IO program. I was planning on applying for graduate schools for this next fall, but because of this whole last year, and like I have a kindergartner, inconsistency with reliable childcare just kind of changed my timeline. And that's fine. But so I will be definitely looking at least some gap in time between finishing undergrad and graduate school. And it's made me think, well, maybe it would be better to make that a slightly longer gap and work for a little while. And so I guess my question is, like, what are the ups and downs of that? In my mind, I think like I personally would like to just go straight on into grad school. But then when I have to weigh out other things like family responsibilities and what is best for us financially and things like that, the other option of kind of like doing one thing, working, doing a master's, working, and then kind of stair stepping like that makes way more sense. And I guess I'm afraid that there are downsides to doing it that way. That would make me not a strong candidate to get into graduate school. But then, Dr. Liddell, you just said what you said, and it made me think maybe not.
Well, I know specifically for our program, we have quite a few people that have worked for like 3 or 4 years and then came back and got their master's in the second years. I think there's somebody who worked, I think he's like 30 maybe. So he graduated when he was 22 and he's worked for about 7 or 8 years. And then he decided to come back and get his master's. And in my cohort as well, we have 2 girls that worked for quite a few years and then decided they wanted to come back. And I think the benefit of that is gaining that practical experience. If you can kind of find a position that would be able to relate specifically to whatever you're trying to pursue your master's in, whether that is if like you said, IO, if you've found like a human resources position or maybe like a talent acquisition recruiter or something, I think the benefit of that is that when you do come into that master's program, and I've seen it in the classroom, is you can relate all of your experience to the theories that you're learning in the classroom. And it's really great for the people that don't have that work experience to kind of hear a practical example and see like, oh yeah, well, when I worked at like so-and-so last year, I was able to kind of see this happen firsthand. And so that's happened a lot in the classroom for me personally. And it's really beneficial for me to just hear from somebody that's worked and hear their examples and kind of like talk to them about that. And I know for one of my friends who has worked, he said that it is really helpful because it's like he can relate things better in his mind. Like, yeah, when I worked here, I totally saw this theory happening, or I totally saw kind of what the professor was talking about. Like that definitely does happen. It's not just that we're reading it in a book. It does happen in the real professional setting. So I think that would definitely be a benefit. But I understand your concern. Like you do want to just kind of like go in and get it done. But I think that working shouldn't turn you off to the idea of going to graduate school after, because you do get that hands-on practical experience that you could relate to the classwork.
Yeah, and Shannon, this is directed at you, but whoever else needs to hear this, please don't compare like your timeline and your plan to other people. I mean, yes, there are benchmarks and there are reference points, but rather than say, Ashton's graduate experience is going to be different than mine because I inserted 4 or 5 years of work there, and then so our experiences are going to be different. But at the same time, I think that she gave great voice to the fact that her process of going right into a graduate program, it provides her an appreciation and some gratitude for those that have some work experience, and so it really makes for a community of learning. And I think that's the biggest difference, and maybe Caleb would agree with this. The biggest difference between undergraduate and graduates. Undergraduates kind of like we're all like on this long walk, but it's very individualized. Where graduate school, there's a lot more camaraderie and community that's built around. So like you'll find study groups and classes and these shared experiences. Like for me, it was differential equations and some of my research statistical work that really was an area I needed to grow in. And so I found some people that could help me where I could write like a boss. I used to be able to. And so like I could take certain roles in a group study. So I think undergraduate and graduate education is different primarily along those lines. So please don't compare your path or your plan to other people, because again, they don't have your variables and your factors and your experience. So just make it true to you.
I can actually add a little bit into that as well. When I graduated from UTC, I immediately rolled into graduate school. I was also working during the time, so I was taking on a lot of coursework, a lot of just personal responsibilities, things like that. But I did find in a lot of my classes, and just if you didn't know, graduate school classes are typically in the evenings or online. So if that sways you in any way, but the folks that were, I've got my master's in education, so the folks that were actually teachers during the day had a lot more feedback to provide for a lot of the things that we were discussing in the program. So I think that work experience definitely gave others the edge in that scenario. So, I think having that work experience is really important, but like like Dr. Liddell said, having that own experience and not really comparing yourself to anybody else is really important. I definitely did that during my time, thinking, I have friends in the program that are finishing before me and doing different things. So just doing your own story is the way to go.
I have a question to ask. Could you please tell me what the process is like applying for grad school? What is that like from beginning to end, and what are the hurdles or the challenges with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So for my personal experience, I had to kind of do some research, and I did that in the fall just to kind of narrow down what programs I wanted to apply to, because I knew that applying to graduate schools, it costs money. And so I knew that I wasn't going to apply to 15 different programs. I just didn't have the funds to be able to do that. I was like, I need to narrow this down. So I did a lot of research. I kind of weighed the pros and cons of every program and just narrowed it down to my top 5. And from there, I actually started applying. So I made sure that I had all of the application dates in order because they varied by school. So I had some that were due in December, I had some that were due in March, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to get the December one done on time because in my head I had 3 that were in March. And so I really needed to remember, okay, this one's due early. I need to make sure I stay on top of that. So that was the first thing I did. I narrowed it down to about 5 programs. I made sure that I had all the information I needed. So the requirements for the applications, and that varies by program as well. But for me, they all required 3 letters of recommendation, a personal statement, and my resume. And then from there, it kind of varied. So and an unofficial transcript. And then it varied by program whether I needed a cover letter or I needed to attach a CV with my resume, or I needed 4 letters of recommendation. That depended, but I needed 3 minimum for all of them. And so I made sure I made notes. So I kind of just made a Word document, and that helped me keep everything together. So I had, like UTC, the application was due March 15th. These are the requirements I needed. This GRE score, I needed these letters of recommendation, I needed this. And so for the GRE, I should have mentioned that I took that at the end of summer before my senior year because I knew that my goal was to apply during senior year. So I needed that score beforehand. I had a lot of friends that were applying to graduate school and their applications were due in March as well, but they knew that they could take the GRE in October and still feel comfortable with the amount of time that they had to apply. I just like to get things done early so I can cross it off my list. So I knew that I wanted to take it early. But that's a personal preference, just knowing when things are due. So that way you can kind of move backwards and say, okay, so I want to take the GRE by this date. So I need to start studying for it at this time. So it does take some preparation, but that's kind of how I balance it out and organize everything. I had a Word document with every school that I was going to apply to. I had the program director's name on there, so that way I knew I could reach out to them with an email. That's usually found on the website. I had the differences in the program. So maybe, well, for UTC, we require an internship. So that way you get like practicum experience, but there were other programs that didn't require that. So I was kind of weighing those and seeing the differences between the programs. And then from there, I just started applying. So they have like a link on the website about how you apply, and whether that is you're sending email directly to the program director, you're applying through GradCast, which is just a graduate school application site. And then I just kind of marked off, okay, I've applied to this one, I've applied to this one. I made sure I asked professors for the letters of recommendation. So I kind of had an idea, okay, I want these 3 professors to write me a letter of recommendation. And I would say that was a big hurdle for me because professors are busy, like they have a lot of things to do. So making sure that they get that letter of recommendation uploaded, because they don't actually send it to you for you to attach with your materials. It's usually like they have to, you put in their email and they get a link and then they'll upload it themselves. So you never really see it. At least that was the case for me. And so that was a big hurdle because I had one professor that she just was really busy and she was kind of all over the place, and that's just who she was. And so I was just like, hey, Dr. Becker, I really need you to upload this letter of recommendation. And she's like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And then she would say, okay, I'm going to get it done by Friday. And it'd be Friday. And I was like, Dr. Becker, just reaching out. So that was a hard hurdle for me because I just had to rely on other people to get that done for my application to actually be completed and go through for review. And then from there, it was just making sure that my resumes were up to date and that they were tailored specifically to that program. My personal statement was highlighting everything that that program wanted to see. They might have like different requirements for what they want to hear about in your personal statement. So it was just kind of organizing that in a Word document so I could split it up by program and then taking it program by program because every program application was different. Does that answer your question? That was a lot.
Okay, all I can do is say
It is a lot. I would say that the starting point would be kind of looking at the programs that you're interested in, because you don't really know what each one is going to require. And so it's hard to kind of make that plan of action without knowing what's required. And so I would say that that would be a starting point, but it is a lot, and it's easier kind of once you put it all on a Word doc where you can see it.
And
Okay.
Ashton, if I couldn't brag on you anymore, I'm super impressed with Ashton, by the way. So Ashton built out these tracking spreadsheets. She's actually brought those to our office. One is for the job search, the other is for evaluating different graduate programs. So if you'd be interested in either one of those, send us an email, and we'd be happy to bounce those right back out to you. This is exactly right. So if you want to send a quick email to career@utc.edu, either Ashton or I will bounce those right back to you. I think they could be really, really helpful. As Cindy's reaction to Ashton's response is indicating, there's a lot there. And again, staying organized and staying clear about your needs and your goals, and maybe how these are a graduate degree or graduate program can help you instead of complicate your life. I think that's staying organized is always going to be an important piece.
Yeah, we have one that helps compare grad schools, and I found that that really helped me when I was looking at graduate schools, because I wanted to know, and it just depends on kind of what is important to you, but I wanted to know how far away these schools were from home. So that way, you know, am I going across the country? Like, am I going to have to fly home? I wanted to know the cost of tuition. I wanted to know whether there were graduate assistant opportunities. And so I kind of put that all together in an Excel spreadsheet, and it's really just makes it a lot easier to look at, and it's less overwhelming. So it seems like a lot now, but it's like, okay, that makes me feel better. And then we have one that also helps you track your actual applications. So that way you can kind of like cross it off the list there too. So we have like the comparison spreadsheet and then the tracker spreadsheet. And both of those are really helpful to kind of just put it all in one space, so you're not, you know, misplacing things or getting confused or having to scroll back through emails.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I just had one question before you finished out. So, if I'm still on the fence about maybe pursuing my master's, do you think that the best course of action would just to go to the Center for Career Leadership and Development and just set up an advising appointment just to kind of get more information on that?
Yeah, we'd love to help. I think that that is really beneficial, is just like kind of have a personalized conversation, and any of us would love to help you. And I think that that is, you know, once it's tailored specifically to you, we can kind of talk about what your like thoughts are, maybe what's keeping you from wanting to go to grad school, what's encouraging you, seeing if it's really necessary for whatever you're going into. Because like I said, you don't have to go and get your master's just to get a job straight out of undergrad. But if that was something you wanted to further your education, or you're really passionate about getting a master's degree, or you just want to see maybe what other opportunities are open with a master's degree, then we would love to help no matter what. But those could be some of the conversations that we have.
Yeah, yes, please come talk to us, Amanda. But I think that the data would suggest that when the economy sours, or when there's an economic downturn, a lot of folks go into grad school as a place to hide. And again, I like hide and seek. I think it's a fun game, but it might not be the best strategy. And so again, I think be mindful about and be really like investigate why you're interested in grad school. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. But if it's a strategy to defer other decisions, then, you know, again, I think at least be cognizant of that. And then two, realize that graduate enrollments have kind of flattened a little bit. So, and they have relaxed, or they've not expected GRE or kind of standardized test scores for a lot of programs. So this might be an advantageous time to explore graduate school if you're on the fence. So there's a lot to weigh and consider, and we'd be delighted to come alongside and ask some questions to help you with your decision-making process. And again, we're not going to disadvantage UTC, but we're not going to require you to go to UTC.
Yeah.
Again,
Yes.
we're interested in your success. And so if your success is to go to another school for a program that we don't offer, then we'll tell you that. So you're not going to hear like the company line from us. Is that fair?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Ashton, thank you again for being part of Mind the Gap and for this session. I got a lot out of it, and I'm confident everyone else did as well. So it's a little bit after noon. So I'm going to stop this session, and then we'll jump into the daily debrief. But thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.